Good evening. Welcome to Larry Rinker Golf Live. Hope you're having a great week. I'm pleased to be joined by my friend, top 100 teacher, top 100 club fitter, James Leitz. How you doing tonight, Leitzy?
I'm doing great, Larry. Great to see you.
Well, great to see you as well, my friend. And it's always a pleasure to see you and learn from you. My new book is out, and it's called The Journeyman. You're in it. You made it. Larry Rinker Golf Live on Thursday, 7:30 to 8 p.m. Eastern. And there's James Leitz. And here is the book, The Journeyman. And James, when I met you and had a chance to learn from you, you taught me how to use the TrackMan launch monitor. We were talking before the show about me coming to visit you there in Louisiana, and you taught me so much. You go around the world really helping fellow PGA members and golf instructors learn how to use technology. And tonight we're going to dive into ground forces and how we use the ground.
Well, it's ground force reaction stuff is not totally new to me. In 1993, I had some plates that you put one under your right foot, one under your left foot, and they only go about 6 inches wide. It was like standing on two 2x6s, and it would measure how your weight was going in the golf swing. And if you remember, my buddy Tommy Moore, we used to hit balls off of it and look at the readouts and kind of figured out what it was. It was a really crude thing, but we actually had more questions than we learned when we finished. And it always had my interest of what we were doing with the ground. And then in 1994, I was lucky to go to Health South in Birmingham, Alabama with Hank Johnson. And Hank Johnson and them were using force plates back then. Nobody really knew what they were looking for, per se, but we were learning. And then, it wasn't, so I kind of always knew I wanted dual force plates. In 2000, I worked with Tulane University in their biomechanics lab, and they had true 3D force plates. So then golf started coming out with different kinds of, force apparatuses such as body track, swing catalyst and so forth. And, I knew that they weren't going to show what the two different plates at one time would show. And they're actually very good pieces of equipment, especially for the money.
Right.
But I knew there was something better out there. So I kind of stayed on the sidelines the whole time and kept prodding Swing Catalyst to come up with a dual plate system. And they just weren't able to do it. And then GASP systems in Europe came up with the dual plate system, and they do a great job with it too. And I settled on the Kistler S2M plates. The Kistler plates are world renowned. They're in most of the high level labs in the world. So are the other two. There's two other different brands. But I went with them because I love their graphs. They had a relationship with TrackMan to put the numbers and blend the numbers on the same screen. So I went with those guys. And when I literally got them, I didn't know how to turn them on, much less know what I was looking for. And look, they've been doing ground reaction forces pretty hard for about 5 years. And I never got into any of it because I said, why do I want to learn on a system that I'm going to have to relearn when I get dual plates? So I really had no one to call. I just started looking at the data, looking at the graphs, figuring out right foot, left foot, what's going on, looking at the video. What I liked the most about it is that the video tied in perfectly to the graphs. So when I saw wherever the club was, I knew where the force was by just looking at it.
Right.
And my goodness, I learned so much. And I've still got a lot to learn. I'm learning every day. I'm learning every day how to practically use them. And then most of the stuff that we're going to show tonight is really the simplistic stuff that I think I wish I'd have known when I first turned them on.
All right. Well, what you're going to share with us tonight, you recently shared at a conference, and you go all over the world.
Virtually.
Virtually. Yeah. Now we can do it all virtually. We got the virtual PGA show coming up here in just a couple of weeks now, even less than 2 weeks. So it's going to be pretty exciting. But go ahead, James. Show us what you have for us this evening.
Okay. We're going to do some little quick definitions and review. Um, you know, I am at Chifuncta Country Club just outside of New Orleans. We've got, I think, the most advanced measuring room in the world that we hit out of. We've got gears, TrackMan. Uh, you know, again, we've got the Kistler Smart to Move plates, and it's a pretty cool thing to put all that technology on at one time. Um, and those of all who've watched me speak, there are only 4 laws in golf. Everything else is optional. So there's so many options in golf, and sometimes people start thinking that things are laws that aren't laws. My favorite slide when I speak is great players pay homage to laws they have no idea exist. If you think these 2 guys know why they're good, you're crazy. They don't, and they don't need to know. But if they ever got off track, you know, the people that are working with them, of course, not Bubba, supposedly he takes no lessons, but, you know, the people that are helping Dustin Johnson, just tapping back to the right spot by what they know. And that's all they need to know. And what are these 4 laws? They're all at impact. So for instance, the law 1 is speed. These are the adjustments. You can give more, less, or the same. The second's path. The path can go vertically down, level, or up, but you also have the path left, straight, and to the right. So path isn't just left, straight, and to the right. It's the vertical path. We call it angle of attack. But really, when your club is moving, it's moving in one vector direction. It's only measured between the horizon and the flagstick. The next is face. We can either have less loft, the same loft, or more loft, or we can have the face left, straight, or right of the target end of the path. And lastly is impact point, where the ball hits on the face. It could hit vertically, low, center, or high, or horizontally, heel, center, or toe. So as a teacher, in the end, what we're really trying to do is manage these 4 laws. And the ground reaction forces are just one way. They're not the only way or the way and so forth. But it's like if you have a little bit of understanding of how the ground reaction forces can either translate your body moving it in a straight line or torque your body to get it to twist one way or the other, can change how the club comes into the ball. So we're going to start out with some pretty simple definitions that I put together that, believe it or not, I had to put together for me first. And I think it's important to know these. So the ground reaction force is the magnitude equal to the weight of the object when still. So if this ball weighs 100 pounds pushing down on this yellow arrow, the ground's pushing up 100 pounds if it's on a firm surface. So if you put this ball in water, it's just going to go to the bottom. So the reaction force of the water might slow the ball going down, but it won't make it stay on top. So the firmer your surface, the more the reaction is going to be opposite of the force of the object itself. Now, this is when it's still. So here's one of a human body. So each mass, no matter what it is, has its center of mass. And in the human body, it's pretty close to the belly button and between the front and back of the body is standing straight up and down. When we start bending over, swinging a club, this actually moves in space, in
Right.
3D space. And sometimes it's external of the body. So with the ground, here's his right foot and left foot pushing straight into the ground by just standing there. These 2 forces have equal and opposite forces going straight up, but we use the combined force of this, which is going straight through the center of mass. So if this person was squatting and jumping equally with each foot, that center of mass would just translate. In other words, the body would just go straight up in the air. But if he was pushing harder with the left foot than the right foot, this combined arrow would be on the side of this center of mass, and he would somersault to the right. So those are important little simple things to understand, that any given time, these vectors change of force, and their relationship to the center of mass determines the torquing of the body. From this is the frontal view, and we'll get into the other views in a second. So there again, the combined vector determines this one here, whether it is a translation straight up and down or a torque of the body. Every object or body has a center of mass. A force through the center of mass will translate it. So if I push this, see again, if I push the force straight through the center of mass, this block only moves in a linear motion. It doesn't turn. But if I put the force to either side of the center of mass, it will create a torque. And that torque will rotate it around its center of mass and slightly translate it. So there will be some linear movement of this center of mass. It will not perfectly rotate around its center of mass if the force is away from it. The greater that force, the faster this will rotate around its center of mass. So in other words, if you increase the force in the same distance away from the center of mass, this will rotate faster. And secondly, if you move that force further from the center of mass at the same magnitude, it will also make it rotate even faster. So, you know, I didn't totally understand moment arm until 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, I've heard that term.
Yes, but you know, nobody ever really explained it very well, I didn't think. So the moment arm is the distance from the center of mass perpendicular to the force direction. So here's the center of mass of this square, and here's the force direction. So perpendicular to the force direction, the distance between here and the center of mass, this black double arrow, is the moment arm. It's the distance. So you know how so you say, what's a practical use of that? Well, when we take and unscrew a bolt with a ratchet, the further we grip that ratchet on the end, the more we could twist the bolt. Pretty simple. We've all dealt with that, right? Go grab that ratchet close to the bolt, you can't even loosen it. So it's the moment arm that allows you. So the more further we can move the force away from the center of mass, the more rotation we can create with the same amount of force. Very, very important thing. So there's the moment arm. The longer the moment arm distance away from the center with the same amount, the faster it'll rotate. Again, if it goes from here to here, it rotates faster. See, so that's a bigger moment arm distance. Now, this is a really cool slide. So this is the golfer looking from the sky. Here's the center of mass. And when we start the downswing, the lead foot is pushing backwards, Greg Norman style, which creates a ground reaction force going forward. And the lead foot pushes towards the ball, which creates a ground reaction force that pushes backwards. So you see these forces are in opposite directions on either side of the center of mass. So that's what really gets this rotating. And then think about it. The further you move those forces away from the center of mass and keep the forces the same, the faster you'll rotate. Okay.
Norman's hips are not that rotated impact when he was #1 in the world in the 80s.
No, but think about this. He might have been late in this force.
Right.
Okay. And not only that, he was left big time before the force was kicking in totally. That's why his foot slipped. There wasn't enough friction on the right foot to keep the foot from coming off the ground, from sliding. Right. Because his weight was already left. You have to have friction. If we did this on ice, we'd all fall down, right?
Yeah, we've seen the videos.
So again, this is a good little analogy here. Here's that double armed wrench that we take off bolts off of a flat tire. We're pushing down on one side and pulling up on the other. And if it's really tight, we move our hand all the way to the end on both sides. That's how you use these laws to your. So what if you need to rotate more? I guarantee you there's not enough of these forces. They're not early enough, and they're not enough magnitude if you even need them.
Right.
Based on the way you swing. Now here's a nice slide that I put together. This is the planes of motion. So the frontal plane is the side to side plane. In a video camera, it's what we call face on view. Okay. The sagittal plane is a front to back plane. Like you said very nicely, it's like bowing, bending forward and backwards. That's the sagittal plane. And the transverse or horizontal plane is one that is parallel to the ground that that plane is parallel to the ground.
It's torque.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, you could torque on any one of these three planes, and we do. All we have to do is have the force be on that plane away from the center of mass, and we will torque on that plane. If the force on that plane is going right through the center of mass, we will only translate on that plane, meaning just move linearly.
Right.
Very important, because until you see someone's force vector in relation to their center of mass, you don't know how it's affecting the body motion at all. You think you're going to see any of that on video? No chance. Okay? Zero. So this is what made it very interesting to me. Excuse me. So again, these are the torques around these three planes of motion. The transverse, this is Greg Norman pushing back, and the ground reaction force pushing forward. This is the foot pushing forward, the ground reaction force pushing back, which creates this rotation around this z-axis, the vertical axis. On the frontal plane torque is the same thing. It's like, look, this is not the best view, I don't think, but it's the lead foot pushing into the ground harder, and that makes the body do almost like a cartwheel to the right. If you push up on the lead foot hard in relation to the trail foot, you'll torque around your center of mass. And then the sagittal, if you want to flip backwards, you'll push your feet down and back, puts this force upwards and forwards, which spins you around this sagittal plane. So again, these arrows are perpendicular to their planes of motion, all three of them.
Right.
So a torque is just the force off the center of mass. So, like for instance, here's max lateral. This is when this golfer meets his max lateral force. That's basically at the top of the swing or barely afterwards. You could see this center, this right foot's pushing down and out. The left foot's pushing down and back too. They're working together in tandem, aren't they?
And that's the orange line. The orange line is the combined of the left and right foot.
The orange is the combined. So think about it. That force vector in relation to there is a long moment arm is going to start kicking this guy around. Now, remember, the force happens before the motion. So you'll see the force kick in, and then you'll see the body starting to rotate as it, you know what I'm saying? It happens first.
Right.
So that's why you can't see it on video. Now I'm gonna go past these two. So this is the z-axis or the horizontal plane, and I'm gonna again go to this best view here. So the horizontal plane, now we're looking perpendicular to it. That's the lead foot pushing forward and the ground reaction force pushing back, and then vice versa, and that's what's creating the rotation point. The rotation. This is at maximum or at maximum rotation for this golfer, rotational force. That's where he is in this swing. Now we get into the verticals. On the verticals, here's the frontal plane torque at max vertical force. So see, this orange arrow is as long as it's going to be. In other words, but it's on this side of the center of mass, so there is somewhat of a cartwheel effect going on at this moment in time. Some people at this point in time, that combined arrow is going right through that center of mass. So what is their body doing? It's only moving up and not rotating.
Okay.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
And so it depends where that given golfer's force vector is at that moment in time is what they're going to do differently than another guy. So unless you know their force vector, you're just guessing. And unless you know their center of mass, you're just guessing. So which body will fall and why? So you've got three different poses. This person, she's just standing on one leg here. This is two legs and the combined vector. When there's only one leg, there's no combined vector. There's only one vector. And then the last one has two vectors pushing down and out, down and out. The combined's going right through the center of mass. So if the combined's going right through the center of mass, this person will not fall. They're balanced. This one, their combined goes right through their center of mass. This one will not fall. But when she's standing on one leg, if that center of mass goes just to the side, the force vector goes just to the side of the center of mass, which way is she going to fall?
To her right foot.
Yeah, to the foot that's off the ground. Now, what's really cool is I use this exact explanation of the feeling of falling downhill on the backswing, late backswing, the feeling of falling towards the target, because the middle of the pelvis and the middle of the upper torso are moving laterally together in the late transition towards the target, especially when the ball's on the ground. And if they start pushing back with verticals too early on the lead side, it kicks the head backwards, which is not good for a person with no lag.
James, would you say all good golfers move laterally before they move rotary from the top of their swing?
I haven't seen any people that play good golf that didn't go laterally, peak laterally, then rotationally, and then vertically. I haven't seen anybody out of sequence on that yet that could really play.
Right.
And even most bad golfers don't do that wrong. You know, when it's surprising, it's absolutely surprising when you look at guys that are, I say bad, a 20 handicapper, 15, 20 handicapper. If you look at their graphs, you're not seeing like grossly wrong timings of that timing. You don't see that very often. What you will see is when that timing or when that max kicks in relation to impact or transition and the amount of it,
Right.
its magnitude. That's where you'll start seeing differences. And where you see the biggest differences is all three forces reverse. The
Right.
lateral goes forward and backwards before impact. The rotational rotates early in the transition before the club even changes direction, and before impact, that torque is going the other way for most good golfers. And then, of course, the verticals, we got to de-weight and a jump. So
Right.
all three of those forces are maxing out one direction and are maxing out the other direction between top and impact on almost every golfer.
Wow.
Very interesting how that works. And it's that reversing action that helps uncock the club to give us speed. So if you don't have that reversing action in laterals, verticals, or rotationals, you're not creating that speed. So
And that's what a lot of guys call the stops.
yes. So what I found out 16 years ago when I got, or 14 years ago, no, 15 years ago, when I got my first 3D system after coming back from Titleist, was how important deceleration was in the pivot coming into impact.
So that's what amazes me, that people are trying to rotate their bodies really fast through the ball.
No,
That doesn't really happen, does it?
I will show you a graph. The rotational force to start the downswing, I call it the Greg Norman shearing action, the right foot pushing backward and left foot pushing forward, is what rotates our body to start the downswing. And before impact, the feet reverse. You've all seen it, right?
Yeah.
Now, not everybody reverses. Guess who don't reverse at all? People with no damn speed.
Right.
None. You see very few good players with speed that rotational vector doesn't reverse before impact. And you see nobody whose laterals don't reverse before impact. And then you see the amount. And then of course the verticals are more de-weight and weight and add weight. It's really cool.
Right.
So again, they're lateral, rotational, and vertical forces.
Right. That's it.
Ground reaction forces start before the club starts back. So I no longer call it address. When the club first moves in the down backswing, I call that start back. You're already using the ground. The total lateral, in other words, when you start the club back on the backswing, the total lateral, in other words, the right and left foot combined vector, is pushing you away from the target. That's where you get that little bump. But before the club gets to P2, the lateral force, the net, is already going toward the target. That's how quickly the players are pushing targetward in the backswing. And hackers, way late.
Way late.
Oh, yeah. The peak lateral, 71% of the tour players that I've measured happen before the top with a driver, not with an iron. Only 42% pre-top with iron. That's the max lateral force, not the lateral movement, the lateral force. Because remember, the force happens before the movement. The peak vertical de-weighting, which is now we're talking verticals, and here's one of my first graphs. So this is a time graph. The left is right here, this first green vertical line is take back. The second vertical line is top of the swing. The third vertical line is impact. And the brown line is the total weight, vertical. The red line is the right foot for this right-handed golfer, and the blue line is the left foot. So you could see at take back pretty close to 50-50 and right at about 100% of body mass. And as the backswing goes, late backswing, you could see the de-weighting starting to happen. De-weighting, and it usually de-weight maxes out just past the top. And I mean just past the top. If this is late, what do you think is going to be late also? If this de-weighting is late, it takes too long to happen on the downswing. What do you think else is late?
The vertical jump is going to be late.
The verticals. And this is where, again, these dual force plates are like child's play to see this. So this particular golfer is a real good golfer. So here comes the verticals, and it's peaking before impact. And then you could see which foot is contributing which, right? So
And the left foot contributing a lot more than the right.
That's correct. Now, you see people, now not everybody's exactly the same. See, he has a little bit of re-energizing of the right foot here, isn't he?
Yeah.
So what do you think creates that little re-energizing into the right foot? Is the lead foot pushing so hard it kicks the golfer back in a cartwheel back to their right foot? That's the torque.
And that's why we see that Z trace.
They're translating towards the hole, but that's that torque kicking that weight back on that trail foot. It's really, really interesting how that works.
Yeah.
The peak lateral reversal. So in other words, you got peak lateral pushing you towards the target, and before impact, then the laterals reverse. So pushing you back away from the target should happen before impact.
And is this with a driver or all clubs?
Driver more than irons.
Right. That's what I would think.
Okay. You do.
So what do you think about a golfer when we just use 2D video and their heads forward of where they were at address? That they're losing speed in the club head doing that, aren't they?
Depends. It depends. Number one, if a person doesn't have lag, it's a non-starter for their entire head to be behind the ball at impact with a ball on the ground. Won't let them do it. I want at least half their head on top of the ball.
Okay.
If they don't have lag. So your vertical people, your people that your upper core players, head way back in their body is not a good place to be behind the ball with the ball on the ground. Ball on the tee, okay. Ball on the ground.
He's good because they're going to hit up like crazy.
Yes. So the head position has a lot to do with it. And what do you think affects the head position? The torques, the frontal torque with the lead side vertical. If it's too hard, too early, it kicks the head too far behind the ball, and you don't want that on an iron.
No.
It's great with a driver because you're trying to hit up on it anyway. We do not use the ground exactly the same with irons versus woods. It's not even close. They're similar, but the magnitudes are not the same and the timings are not the same.
Right. What about verticals on an iron versus a driver, timing wise?
The verticals on the driver are earlier.
They're earlier.
And think about it. And since they're predominantly lead, how can that help a ball hit off the ground if they're early and hard with a ball off the ground? I reduce people's lead side verticals from time to time to get them geometrically to where they could bottom out and pass the ball.
Right.
They can't bottom out past the ball if they got tons of lead side verticals cartwheeling them to the right with no lag.
Wow.
Unless
I see that in short game.
Sure. All right. Now the vertical, I like this one too. The vertical Z-axis or horizontal plane torque peaks at about P5 when the lead arm's about parallel to the ground. That's when the Greg Norman's at its highest, peaks. And 90% of the tour players pre-left arm parallel to the ground peak with this rotational shearing of the feet. Okay?
Okay.
90% early. Now, what do you think that is for an average golfer? It's horrible. Okay? Partly because they don't know what to do or even how to do it. And I'm
Right.
not saying they're going to become rotating fools, but it sure doesn't hurt to have a little bit of that added in there.
Right.
Because we're all using all three. The question is how efficiently.
Right.
Peak vertical, 90% pre-shaft parallel to the ground of the tour players are measured. So this peak vertical right here is before this point. Most really good players, it's way back here.
But
Especially
you say the motion happens after the pressure.
that's correct.
So they're actually going to be starting to rise now. They're going to be, you're going to see them pushing up.
Yeah, after the force, you'll start seeing the body really going up.
Right.
So here's one. I want to show you this one. This one's pretty cool. This is an average golfer. This is a girl, her first golf lesson ever. Okay. Decently athletic, 61 miles an hour with a 7-iron. So here's her graph. Again, let's re-explain. Lead foot in blue. Red line is right foot, and total is in brown. Address in green. A top at purple. Impact at red. Finish at green. So as she goes back, she goes to the top. What does she do at the top? This is totally different than everybody else. She's not even de-weighting. She's adding weight at the top of the backswing.
Does that mean she's standing up?
Yeah, then she de-weights, which is way too late. And so her verticals are super late. And they're with both feet. Okay, see the red's almost as much as the blue.
Right.
Again, you add the red line and the blue line equals the brown line.
Okay.
Okay. So she gets to 150% of her body mass at her peak verticals, which is not a horrible thing, but it's both feet. So what we did, we taught her how to use them better. Now watch this graph versus this graph. So now she at least has, she's still de-weighting a little late, but at least she's de-weighting closer to the top. And now her lead side is more dominating in the verticals and her trail side's trailing off.
So what did you do to get her to de-weight?
You see this little force pedal on the ground, this little rubber?
Yeah.
You could use, I don't care if you use a sponge, force pedal.
Half a tennis ball?
Yeah, I taught her when to push that into the ground. And you can't push that starting from the top unless you're already there. So if you're so trail at that moment and you push up on that lead, you're just gonna cartwheel behind the ball. Okay. So you got to get left before you vertical.
Right.
So understanding how these torques come in and when, based on when the force is applied and how much, is what starts sending the golfer. And again, when we're hitting the ball off the ground, most people have trouble bottoming out past the ball.
Right.
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool, James.
But you tell me how much time
I'm going to a PowerPoint slide here.
Okay.
There's my new book that's out. And here's James Leitz, my guest today. You can reach him at leitzgolf@gmail.com. He's at the Chafuncta Country Club in Covington, Louisiana. And also, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Titleist FootJoy, the Ritz-Carlton Golf Club Orlando, and the Red Sky Golf Club in Vail, Colorado. And James, a lot of technical stuff in there. I think a lot of us are going to go back and watch this again and just really get our arms around. That's one of the great things about video. This will be on my Facebook page, and I'll also post this to my YouTube page. But in simple things for our listeners tonight, what are some simple things that you think they can do to get this to be more efficient in how they use the ground? Because we know whether they're upper, mid, or lower core, they use the ground differently.
Sure.
An upper core player pivots more around the left leg. The low core player, the Dustin Johnson, strong grip, really rotational pivots around the trail leg. But, just in coming into the ball, I just think it's interesting whether they're upper, mid, or low core. Their lateral motion peaks first, the rotary peaks second, and the verticals peak third.
Yeah, and they're so close together, Larry, the golfer can't discern them. So the only thing the golfer could do is maybe work on the timing of how early they try something. You could change it that way. But I think the takeaway thing is, for your average golfer, one of my favorite drills that I used to use a long time ago, but I use all the time now, is just a step drill,
Right.
where you have them take a 7-iron, set up to it normally, then move their left foot or their lead foot back to their trail foot, keep their trail foot in one place, and then hit the ball full speed. And they could step whenever they want. Most poor players will step very late.
Right.
You have to start stepping as soon as the club goes back. And when they
So
feel
the
that
old
timing,
baseball drill.
yes, when they feel that timing, and I want them to also feel the upper and the lower falling towards the target as they're stepping. And then when they put their feet apart, I want them to feel the same thing, because in 3D, make no doubt about it, the upper and the lower in the early transition are moving together towards the target, not just the lower. The
Wow.
upper and the lower, especially with the ball on the ground. When the ball's on the tee, a little different. The upper one stays more stable and the lower goes, but when the ball's on the ground, they both go together. So that's that downhill falling motion, de-weighting of the lead leg. And then here comes the verticals from the lead leg to push them out of it. And they'll hit more balls where they hit the ball and then the ground than they've ever done before.
Yeah, and it's really about just getting that weight in that front foot earlier. Just
I start more people at 60-40 left than I ever have in my whole career.
at take back.
Yes. In fact, yes, absolutely.
Wow. Well, James, thanks for coming on tonight. Always learn from you, my friend. All the best here in 2021. Till next week, keep swinging.
Thank you, Larry.